communal living area. But as you were pointing out, they live communally as a community. So it's not like one ant goes off and stashes it in a hut somewhere for later consumption. No, they share everything. But what made us observe that is because there was someone who noticed ants and made a system. And just like you're a systems analyst, you go through and you look at someone's existing system. Is this how you do it?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't use system analyst. But
You don't?
It is interesting.
It is. So, well, just in case you're a system analyst and you go and you say, okay, what do you want me to do? I'm a consultant and I'm going to look at your system to see what you can do better. But they look at an existing system and they look at the position on a system that you're in. So when we were looking at the ants, or even if we look at, I can remember when I was in the 4th grade, and they used to call it social studies. And you would look at some far-off society in another part of the world. And they would tell you grandmother and grandfather lived this way. And it would be quite interesting, especially for a 9 and 10-year-old, to see that people live different ways. But as I think about it, it was even more interesting that someone went and studied them and made a system out of how they live. They wrote it down, and they wrote down the patterns. So the patterns of some people who live in the Sahara Desert, they wrote them down, or some patterns of some people who live along the Amazon River. There's some cultural, social patterns there. Now, when you look at Western life, like how we live here in Australia, is there evidence of there's some patterns on how we live? So can some sociologists come and say, this is how people in Brisbane live? So they come and they study, okay, what do they say? What would they say? Okay, I'm from different country. Tell me, how do you live? Please, can you tell me, how do you get the food? And what would you say?
In a plastic bag.
Plastic bag. This is plastic wrapper. This is perfect. Okay. And then you eat the plastic wrapper. Put it on fire.
Some people do it. They live in their microwave.
Oh, put it on fire. And then, so how would someone? How would you describe your life? And how would you describe how communally you're living?
Unsustainably.
Okay, so that's how you would describe it. We have unsustainable living practices. But no, give me some description. Families. Yeah.
We're angst-ridden, alcohol and drug-based, grossly materialistic society.
Okay. Okay, so I'd write that down. Angst-ridden, drug, materialistic society. Okay. Now, how do you make the family?
I'm a boring sociologist, so I'll give you
Okay.
a sociologist.
Okay.
I would say that in recent years we've had a real decline of the nuclear family, this idea of mum, dad and kids, that we've got kids that stay home a long time with mum and dad, but then we've got different sorts of families emerging. So we've got people that live collectively in share houses, we've got lots of individual people living on their own. People are not pairing up as they used to, or marrying later in life, so people are having less kids in Australia. I talk about those sorts of things in terms of the changing nature of the family, that the idea of the nuclear family, that we live in different forms of collectives that we call family now. We don't rely on that couple, or we do that later in life.
Now, why has this changed? Or has it ever been like that?
Is the pace of changing? The pace of life?
Sometimes it's like I think the government wants us to do, they want us to be community, and have our own mind about things. That, because if we're all together, we share ideas and we realise that we're having pulled over our eyes. I mean, both corporations and governments want us to be malleable and that to their ideas. They want us to buy things. They want us to feel like we need them, and not be empowered enough to realise that they should be looking after all our best interests. I think they try and keep us in the dark.
So they try to keep you individuals.
Yeah, because
You're easier to manipulate when you're an individual.
I think you're being a bit kind with governments. They're not that smart.
Ryan works in the government. He knows.
US government definitely.
No, we struggle with it.
still votes me.
Perhaps I can add to that. I think it's also a function of generational differences. Like there's distinct differences in characteristics in each generation, and I think that has to do with that. I think just increased pressure in society as a result of just doing more and being in a knowledge economy and information society. I think it's just made us really speed up the pace, and as a result, people feel pressured, and then you're on a tightrope, and it's difficult, I think, to maintain the relationships that maybe we would have been able to if we didn't have technology and all the other things that are pressure.
So where I'm getting at is that there's really not, when I in the 4th grade and they showed us the Hunza people and how they were hunters and gatherers and they've done this for centuries, or whatever people I was studying, that there was something you could study in a pattern of their lives. But modern day person, you're not finding that. Even within yourself, you can't make a pattern. You're like this age, and you don't fit in a pattern culturally, sociology. It's just very difficult to fit in a pattern where someone from somewhere else can write about your way of life that's not chaotic. That this is just one word, chaos. So there's always this need to find a pattern, just like you study. What's the person called who studies ants? Entomologist. And a person who studies snails. There's people who study snails, slugs, ants, spiders, different types of spiders. Their PhD, they've studied them for 30 years. So they can tell you any type of mating habits, how they make their, how they gather food, who are their predators. They can say that because they've studied. Now with us, we're not finding it so easy with modern person. But when we look at ourselves on a higher level, on a spiritual level, we can actually find patterns where we fit in, where we're at a certain level of our evolution. So in some societies, when you have a 5-year-old child, they would take that 5-year-old child and put them out in the desert and have them survive for a week or two, just to bring them to show them how they had to live and to perform some austerity. Because some societies don't allow children not to be austere. The children have to learn austerity. They don't have to just have fun until they're 35 and then they start to get serious, So that's what they do in some societies. So that's a documented thing that they bring in the passage of rites. So what we're looking at is each of us as individuals is on a certain level. I was going to talk about the yoga ladder. We're at a certain part of our lives where we're advancing and evolving on the ladder, what we call yoga ladder. That is uniting with something greater than ourselves. Now how we unite is what that yoga is called. Now if you went through a yoga book, a yoga encyclopedia from A to Z, there's probably thousands of types of yoga. Did you know that? Thousands. Depending on how the person is linking, that's what the yoga is. So first, if you start with A, of course, Ashtanga yoga. That's the first one that comes to mind. And that's linking through the 8-limbed process. And that 8-limbed process, if you look at Ashtanga yoga, you can actually say that this yoga process was something that was there already. People were naturally doing Ashtanga yoga. And this great sage just wrote it down. What he saw naturally occurred, like most people do. So when we see things writing down, it's already been revealed. You can see it was revealed through the activities of the persons that were there in that age. People naturally had good habits, yama niyama. People naturally did exercises to keep their bodies supple and fit so that they can sit down and breathe deep and have concentrated effort and then finally reach the samadhi where they had a spiritual union. And that was a natural thing. So he wrote down these sutras to talk about a naturally occurring thing. And then if we go to B, what's a bhakti yoga? Bhakti yoga is actually also a naturally occurring thing. When the soul, through devotion, links through the higher power. And it's naturally occurring that there's different stages when the soul is linking through devotion. There's different symptoms. And then you go to D, Dhyana yoga, meditation yoga. So you can go through, there's so many different types of yoga. But what we're like what we try to do at Atma is to help you to put a mirror up and say, where are you at in your yoga ladder? And are you where you want to be? And do you want to go any further? If you don't, fine. But what part of your evolutionary cycle are you in? Where are you? And by doing this, you can gauge, well, do I want to stay here or do I want to go farther? Is this the farthest I want to go? So this is very important for us to come to grips with ourselves. Where is it? Where am I? What stage am I at? Because we are all in a different stage. So if you know the different terminologies, I can only, maybe some other practitioners can speak for themselves. So you look at myself, I'm karmakanda. Karmakanda, you begin at a stage where you just have no interest in spiritual life, you just do activities that you don't want the reaction to, but you have no interest in spiritual life. So you may evolve from the karmakanda into karma yoga where you say, well, I want to do some activities, but I want the fruits of my activities. So, I'm going to perform some good activities and I want to get a bit of the fruits. And then maybe you say, wow, I'm not interested in the fruits because they cause me such miseries, but I'm attached to the activity. That could be there too. You could be at that stage. Okay, now I'm not attached to the activities. I just want to give up the fruit, but I just want to do something. Or I just want to evaluate what I'm doing. So different stages. So as personally, I'm in the stage between evaluating what I'm doing and trying to find reasoning in what I'm doing, but yet be able to give a selfless and heartfelt emotions in the activity. That's where I can gauge myself at, because it's an evolution. Others may be at different stages, but we have to come to grips that we are in some stage. We are in some stage. And once we find that we are in some stage, we can help ourselves to say, do I want to go further? Or is this enough for me? And if it's enough for you, you just become perfect at what you're doing. And eventually you'll see different things happening quite different. So, and of course, you may say, well, how do you gauge yourself? Is there some barometer that says, oh, ding, you're at 4.7, ding, you're at, how does one gauge yourself? So this is where we have our study of the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita it's a universal study of human nature. Because we're all in the book. We can't say that we're not in the Bhagavad Gita. None of us can say, oh, that doesn't have any relevance to me, because we're all spirits, souls. And we all are in these different bodies and existing and exhibiting symptoms of consciousness. Different grades of consciousness, but we're all exhibiting consciousness. Is anyone not exhibiting consciousness here? Everyone is. Just different levels of consciousness through this particular body, but actually we all have the same level of consciousness. We're just exhibiting it differently at different times. So I just want to, I've got 2 more minutes here. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called Jnana Yoga, Meditation Yoga, the 6th chapter, the 3rd verse says, for one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of material activities is said to be the means. It's pretty... Translation. That is a translation. Well, it has a commentary. The purpose of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder for obtaining the topmost spiritual realization. Now, I was just going to bring a ladder in, and I was going to have an exercise. And I was going to ask someone to go from the first rung to the top rung without climbing the ones in between. Can anyone do that? Is there any ladders around? It's pretty hard to do. But when one is doing the yoga process, one can see, even when one is just simply dealing with the flexibility of the body and the control of the mind and the breath, one is at different stages, one can see one is becoming elevated. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to the perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are known by different names. So that's what we're coming across in our journey in yoga. Different parts of what we're realizing actually have different names. And they have thousands of Jnana Yoga, Samadhi Yoga, Agni Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, HIJK, Mantra Yoga, Tantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, Raja Yoga, Abhaya Yoga, and it's just so many different stages that go to my head of yoga. Just so many. Satya Yoga. And depending on, it says, according to various elevations, different parts of the ladders are known by different names. But we have to say there is a lowest point and there is a highest point. Now, it's not to say that as you're practicing one yoga that you can't, it's not like it's overlapping into another, because they're so close, many of them. Like Agni Yoga Agni means fire, so it's taking the fire of pranayama and the mind and using them to produce fire in the body that will actually help the Kundalini Shakti to rise. It's a different way of doing the Kundalini process. So they're overlapping. So where you may be by practicing Kundalini Yoga on the ladder, that takes investigation. Or where you may be, because we're practicing Hatha Yoga here. We did some Vinyasa Yoga this morning. That was flow yoga. We're practicing Hatha Yoga. And where that Hatha Yoga is with each and every one of us is quite different on that ladder. And that's where we have to have an understanding of what the topmost and the beginning. We have to have an understanding of the varying degrees. But all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga and may be divided into 3 parts, namely Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called the Yoga Ruruksha stage, and the highest rung is called the Yoga Ruda stage. Not that those Sanskrit terms mean anything to you, because they're, just throwing out some Sanskrit names, but you can see that one means the beginning and the end. So are there any... We're open for discussion for a few seconds here. So what do you think? Does that fit a description of... So we can't all the people here who are living in Australia, we can't actually get a pattern between our behaviors and how we're hunting and gathering. But as spiritual beings, we can get a pattern of which level we're at on the spiritual ladder. We can, and we can actually place ourselves. And we might be quite content to be there, or we might want to go up the ladder. Or we might want to come back down the ladder. Who knows? But it's there for us as living entities. That is our minute independence, is to go up and down this ladder, investigating, and to find out the possibilities, the unlimited possibilities that we can pursue in our lives. Any comments, questions, corrections, objections?
I find it hard sometimes to see in myself, like where I'm at. You know, even though we're in a spiritual community and we have, you know, we've all got so much interaction with people who are more advanced on the ladder or less advanced, but still, it's still difficult to. I find it very difficult to know where I'm at, or you know, what's the next thing to do. Often I feel like that.
How to refine your
how to refine my ability to understand at what level I'm at and how should I act accordingly.
Yeah, that's true. You want me to tell you now? Well, it's very hard to look at yourself and give it true.
Yeah, because it's so coloured, you know. We always see.
Yeah, the mirror is just perfect today. You know? It's perfect every day, as a matter of fact. And I'm perfect too. It's hard to see. It takes actually takes someone to help you to see how you are. But it takes humility for you to be able to submit yourself to someone to say, you know, I think you're like this. And it takes trust. Because someone may tell you you're like this, but they have to have no agendas in telling you that. Because if they tell you, you know, you really need to get into some financial situation, you know. And then they've got a job for you right there, you know. Or they've got something. You really need to move onto a farm and do some work. And they've got a position on the, you know, it's just like, so you have to, it's a very difficult position in our modern society, how to be a modern yogi. Because it's